use the reality of death, not as a morbid thing, but as an inspiration to live life even more fully, as an inspiration, knowing that you don't have forever. Like, you don't know when that moment will come. And if death came, would you be ready? If not, why not? What's ungiven? What's unsaid? What's unexpressed? What's unforgiven? So much time we waste waiting for someone to apologize, holding grudges because we think we have time and we don't. We don't. And so how would you need to live in such a way so that if death came, because it's going to come, hope we all live a long life. But I guarantee you many, if not 80%, 90% of the people, 95% of the people that died today, they didn't know they were going today.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Hey everyone, welcome to the Good Space Podcast. Today we have Kute Blackson on the show. He's a beloved inspirational speaker and transformational expert. Born to a father known as the Miracle Man of Ghana and a Japanese mother who couldn't speak the same language as her husband, he was public speaking at the age of 8 to hundreds of thousands of people in his father's church, and then by 14 was ordained as a minister to take over the family ministry someday. But instead, he decided to carve his own path and do something different. Not only is he a best-selling author of You Are the One and his new book, The Magic of Surrender, but he's been featured on The Larry King Now Show, NPR, Mind, Body, Green, and many more. His interview with Tom Bilyeu on the popular podcast Impact Theory, as well as Bulletproof podcast, received rave reviews. Kute is a member of the Transformational Leadership Council, a select group of 100 of the world's foremost authorities in the personal development industry. He is widely considered a next generation leader in the field of personal development, and his book, The Magic of Surrender, has glowing endorsements from Jack Canfield, Mike Dooley, Martha Beck, and more. And his mission is simple: to awaken and inspire people across the planet to access inner freedom, live authentically, and fulfill their true life's purpose. Kute, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you because I know, obviously, by the title of your newest book, surrender is a big message of yours. And honestly, the more I dove into your story and the more I read your book, which I did read, from what I know about you, it makes total sense why you're passionate about teaching people to surrender. Your life is an example of surrender, from your dad putting you on stage to speak, where you were just like, okay, here I go. I don't know what I'm doing, but here I go. I'm going to speak. And then your mom dying of cancer, which, by the way, that story, I cried reading that story. You just said it so beautifully in the book. And then breaking up with the woman of your dreams. I think you mentioned that on Tom Bilyeu's podcast. And then living in London, then moving to the States. Like, basically, your life hasn't followed a traditional path. So obviously, a lot of surrender had to be a part of that. So when was the clear aha moment that surrender is the key to life? Because some people just let life happen to them and they don't recognize what the key thing is in that moment. So I'm just curious, for you, what was that clear moment? And does surrender come naturally or feel comfortable to you now?
I think there were many, many, many moments along the way. So I don't know if it was just like one aha moment. It was just a series of surrenders along the way. And even many of those moments, I didn't know that surrender was what was happening, or that was the key. But it's something I was forced to do in those moments along the way. And I never consciously participated in the process of life as, okay, I'm surrendering. It was just like, I don't have a choice. And so that's what was happening. And you know, I think when my mother passed away, I was already, living surrender, but something went to a whole nother level because, you said you read the book, but for those that didn't, my mother passed away in 2017. I got to spend a year with her, flying back and forth from Los Angeles to London. And about what started off as the worst year of my life turned out to be the best year of my life, because I got to just be with her and sit with her and love her. And it was such a sacred time. And when the doctors finally said, basically, you're going to die, so get your affairs in order, it was a very It is heartbreaking. I mean, I was preparing for it. I was surrendering and letting her go, but the moment's still hard. The moment is still difficult. And I think when I heard those words, I looked my mother in the eyes and I said, "Are you afraid?" And my mother, who's a little Japanese woman, she simply said, "I'm not afraid because I know I'm not this body, that this body is really a temporary vehicle for my soul. And when this body goes, that I will not die. I will be with you from the other side." And I felt her peace. And so I said to her, this is a moment where the power of surrender really struck me. When anyone can surrender when things are well, when you have zillions in the bank, when you get exactly what you want, when life is going according to plan and you're manifesting like crazy. But when shit hits the fan and you're in the face of your own mortality and things are falling apart and hell's breaking loose, like, can you live surrender in those moments? And so here my mother was in the face of death, like she was dying. They just told her that you don't have long to live. Could be days, weeks, months. And she was in peace. And so when I looked at my mother and I said, "Is there anything that I can do for you I just wanted to be a good son. What can I do for you? Where can I take you? What can I buy? What do you want? What do you need?" My mother looks me in the eyes and she says to me, "There's really nothing I want and there's nothing I need. The only thing I want is what God wants for my life. That's it." And she was in such peace, just such calmness. And I saw, and I read, everything kind of came together, and I realized that this was the secret. This was the key. Everything made sense. Like, this was the key to her freedom. She wasn't attached to dying. She wasn't attached to living. I mean, she's not saying she wanted to die, but she wasn't attached to either. She was truly open to the highest unfolding of her soul, where she wasn't like holding on, pretending to know. She was just available and open to like whatever is highest for my soul. I've done my best and I've lived my life, and whatever happens, happens. And I saw that she was free. And in that moment, I saw the real magic of surrender, the power of surrender, that surrender is the password to freedom in that moment. And that was, I won't say an aha moment, but a deepening of the awareness that I had of the real power and the magic of surrender in that moment. And that's when so many of the kind of things about my life started to make sense. But once she passed away, I was inspired. I felt this energy to write a book. I didn't know what the book was going to be about. I thought maybe it would be the lessons from my mother. Maybe it would be, the living your purpose, or, dealing with death. And I sat down. Thought I'd be clever, you see. I sat down and I started strategizing all of the books I thought would be bestsellers, all of the books I thought would be New York Times, get me on Oprah, right? All of the books I thought my publishers would want, my readers would want. And all of them were like really smart, intelligent, clever ideas. And none of those felt authentic. None of those felt in my being like, this is true. It just felt like marketing angles. And the only word I wrote on that board that felt true was the word surrender. And that's when I felt this pull. And I had to surrender to the book about surrender. And I saw that the book had a soul of its own. And when I surrendered, like, okay, this is the book that is seeking to be written, it was like a kind of aha moment where everything about my life and my childhood and my parents and how they met and everything that happened to me started to make sense. And I began to realize that, this is the book I was born to write. And I started feeling the alignment of like that surrender is the most powerful thing that we can do. Anytime I have manifested something in my life, but I have truly surrendered, I saw that it wasn't really me manifesting. It was as though when I surrendered, I got more than I could have planned or anticipated. So I really believe that surrender is the most powerful thing. I believe that surrender is the real secret to manifestation. Surrender is the real key to the next level. That if you look at any of the truly great ones, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Mandela, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, they all surrendered themselves. When I really studied these people, I was very inspired by, I saw that all of them, Hey, Oprah, even, Elon Musk. People might think, the hell does Elon Musk have to do with surrender? Well, you make $200 million, PayPal. Most people would just run off into the sunset. He felt a calling. Love him or hate him, that's separate. But he felt a calling to Solar City, Tesla, SpaceX, put all of his money. How many of us would put all of our money into a vision that we feel a calling that is bigger than ourselves? Not me. But he felt this calling, risked everything. To me, that's a form of surrender. Mandela saying, okay, I feel this undeniable something inside of me, and I know what this might mean for my life, and maybe even 27 years in prison, but I have to follow this calling. That's surrender. Mother Teresa going down one trajectory in her life and then going to India and feeling a calling to totally shift her life and serve the poorest of the poor. That's surrender. And so I really looked at the people I was really inspired by. Bruce Lee, right? Talked about how he got to a point where he was inspired to go beyond technique. Like, that's a form of surrender. This inspiration to just be who he uniquely, authentically is was a form of surrender, because many of us, we're so afraid to just surrender to what we are and our authentic nature. And so when I looked at the people who I was inspired by, I saw that all of them in their own way, they surrendered themselves to life, to God, to the infinite, to the divine, to the goddess, to the universe, to their souls, to their deepest truth. And in that surrender, they transcended themselves. They transcended their human limitations, the human sort of conditioning, and tapped into another dimension of potential. And I think life was able to use them and express through them and live through them and manifest through them in ways that they could not have imagined. And so for me, when I reflected on my mother and my life and those that inspired me, I just saw, like, this is the key. And then I reflected on, and if maybe everyone listening to this conversation could maybe reflect for a second. If you think about all of the best things that have ever happened to you in your life, the best thing, meeting your soulmate, that person, that situation, did you plan it? Did you sit there and go, yeah, at 12 p.m., I'm going to go into the coffee shop and my soulmate will be sitting there? Well, these things just happened, in the process of living life. We didn't plan them. And so this is why I'm passionate. And I really believe that surrender is the key. It's the password, and it's something that I feel as a humanity, when I look at the last few years, I feel as though we as a humanity since 2020 have been put into a sort of surrender seminar. We've been forced at COVID, live surrender, pandemic, lockdowns, up, down. No one knows what the hell's going. It's a form of a surrender practice in a certain way. Regardless of what's going on out here, we were forced to find a place of deeper freedom within ourselves. To me, that's part of surrender. And so I feel as though we are being initiated and invited into a whole new way of living, one that is being moved from a ego-based model, ego-based method of living life, which is all about, what do I want? Know what you want, force it, make it happen, make shit happen, crack it open, go like get clear on what you want. And what I will say is, you can manifest that way, and it can be wonderful. I mean, but what I found is there are limitations to manifesting from the mind or the personality or the ego, because the mind is conditioned. And no matter what we can imagine with our minds, we are still conditioned by the past. The mind and the ego is not able to see the total infinite possibilities of what is seeking to happen. And so in surrender, I think the question that I love to ask, that I invite people to ask, is not simply, what do I want? Because the I is limited, but the question is a bigger question. It's really about, well, what is it that life is seeking to express through me? What is it that the universe is seeking to express through me? What is the deepest impulse of my soul seeking to express and make manifest through me in this particular moment? And I think when we can open to that and catch that vision, and then align our mind and our body and our intention and our visualizations and our resources and our marketing and our money with what is true, then we are in flow. Then we're working in harmony with nature. Then we are truly living surrender. And so it's something that I feel is the key.
Wow. That was just speaking to my soul, everything you said. I love that you mentioned non-attachment, the idea that you don't attach to a certain outcome, ego, how it is limited. And it reminds me of how, the ego, it only knows what it has experienced before. So already it's like, trying not to depend on that for your answers. And surrender is basically putting the spirit back in the driver's seat, pushing the ego aside a little bit and open to that possibility. You said so many amazing things. I'm trying to gather my thoughts of like, okay, how am I going to pick things out from here? So my mind kept going to obviously surrender, the idea of surrender. It needs a branding makeover, right? It's been, like you said, the masculine energy type of action where surrender's the last resort. Only after you pushed, you forced, you chased until you couldn't anymore. And then how you describe surrender is definitely more expansive. It's more flow. It's more feminine energy where we can release and allow things to unfold and attract to us, which shows how loving God is, right? That we can just be still. We can just be peaceful and open and receive more than we could ever imagine, versus when we try hard, we don't actually get authentically what we're meant to get, which is kind of crazy to the mind, right? You're just like, how could that be real? So knowing that you probably speak to a lot of people that struggle to overcome that conditioning, to understand the difference between surrender as the world says it and surrender as you teach, like, how do you start getting someone past that conditioning or to see it the way that you've experienced it and that you know it?
Yeah. First, I'll just speak to kind of what you said, and then I'll maybe break down a few things, which is like, yes, there is a misconception. First, it's just shifting the paradigm of what surrender is in one's framework, because the way we hold it, we kind of know it's what we should do, kind of, sort of, but we resist it because of the framework and the paradigm with which we hold it as something negative, as weak, as passive, as giving up, as waving the white flag, that if you surrender, you're going to be a victim, you're going to be abused, you're going to be left behind, you're going to be a doormat, you're going to just sit there and do nothing. It means just laziness. It means rolling over. It means like, turning the other cheek in a negative way. It means that you won't manifest your dreams, that it might mean like you got to just sell everything and wear robes, go to the Himalayas and live in a monastery. Who the hell wants to do that, right? Not a great advertisement for surrender. If you surrender, you're going to get less than. And I'm actually thinking, no, like just what you said, like, what if you got more, like more than you could have even planned with your conscious, limited egos, imagine, like more. Like I want people to hear like that surrender is more. Letting go leads to more. Maybe not what you expected. Maybe not what you thought you wanted. Maybe not what you had planned. But I promise you, what if it was better? What if it was beyond? What if it was more fulfilling? What if it was more amazing? And so that more amazing is what we want, but we're not able to see it from a limited lens right now. And so that's what surrender gives you access to. It is a letting go of control, or the illusion of control. It's when we stop trying to force and manipulate life to fit our limited idea of what we think it should be. Surrender is to take the limitations off of life so that we can be truly available. Because most of the times we don't realize that with our intention and our ideal scenes and our goal setting, even sometimes we're actually holding on so tightly to what we think should be that we are limiting this infinite intelligence of the universe, because we're so holding on to life has to be this way and it has to be this way and this person has to be my soulmate, and we don't realize that we're blocking the flow. We're blocking our blessings. We're getting in the way of our own blessings without attachment. And so surrender is that willingness to take the limits off of life and to allow life to show you, to allow life in its infinite intelligence to reveal itself to you, and to trust that it will. And so, yes, for surrender does seem difficult. And for many of us, I want to acknowledge that surrender can feel difficult. But what I want to propose is a different paradigm, that surrender is actually natural and surrender is actually easy. the depth of our being, all of us are surrendered. We were surrendered when we were born. Surrender is our true nature. We have just been conditioned out of it. So we tell ourselves, it's so hard, it's so difficult, which it feels that way. But in essence, it's easy. Just being open to that possibility of a paradigm shift, that it doesn't have to be hard. It's easy. So for those listening on audio, I'm making a fist, I'm holding a pen. I'm holding this pen very, 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 very tightly. At first, it feels difficult, but the more I make this fist and grip and hold on, eventually this holding on posture starts feeling normal. But it's actually taking a lot of energy to hold on. And so if I say, well, let go and surrender, how easy is that? It's just effortless. But because I'm so used to making this fist to hold on, then surrender feels scary. And so first, I just want to propose that surrender is your true nature, is natural. What resists surrender is the ego. What resists surrender is the ego, and the ego is your perceived sense of what you believe yourself to be. This name, body, form, structure that you identify as you. Kute, Francesca, Susie, Bob, and all of the beliefs and stories and ideas and identities and memories that you associate with you that have happened, that you hold so tightly onto, this is ego. And because we've been conditioned from childhood by parents, by religion, by society, by education, by university, by media, by social media, by everything outside, to buy into the idea that we are this limited ego structure, then for the ego, surrender feels terrifying. Surrender feels scary, because for the ego's job is to reinforce its existence. And the ego's job is to make sure that you don't get hurt again like you were hurt when you were young. The ego is a creation. See, the ego is not a thing. The ego is a process. It's a process of identification. And that process of identification came into play in response to certain experiences that were there in childhood as a way to make sure we don't get hurt again, as a self-protective mechanism. So when we understand the nature of ego, when we understand that ego is what resists, but ego is not what we actually are, we can then shift our relationship with ourselves and what we think is ourselves, because the degree to which we believe we are the ego is the degree to which we're not free. And so resistance is natural, because when you say surrender and let go, it's like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. And then we hold on even more. Control is a way that the ego tries to keep us safe, but is also a way that the ego seeks to reinforce its existence. Because if I can control everything, then I am something. If I can control everything, then I will be protected and I won't get hurt again. And so now we mistakenly believe, based on certain childhood experiences, wow, if I can control the weather, control my spouse, control the response, control my kids, control my husband, control, everything and everyone around me, control how I'm perceived, then I'm going to be okay. And so letting go feels freaking terrifying for the ego, and is natural and is normal. So even shifting the perception that, resistance and fear is okay. Then we can begin to embrace that, not as something we have to resist, but as something we get to embrace. So when resistance and fear arises in response to surrender or in response to life, we can observe it and meet our own resistances, not with more resistance, saying like, oh, you should surrender, but we can meet our resistance with compassion and loving and understanding. It's like, of course, it's terrifying for the ego, so the ego resists even more. So as children, we were free. If you look at the child is free. A child jumps on the table naked, runs through, the house naked and sings. It doesn't care. We don't care if we don't sound like Adele or Bruno Mars. We're just being, like, we don't have this self-consciousness. We were just surrendered. We cry when we felt like crying. We poop when we felt like pooping. We hit our head. We cry. We get over it. We move on. We're not thinking about it 17 days from now. We're in the moment. We just surrendered to what's arising, full of curiosity, full of allowing, full of embrace, full of, embracing the unknown. So what the hell happened to us as children? We were these free, whole, essential, loving beings. we incarnated into this human experience. We met our parents, and God bless them. Our parents, they were just doing the best that they knew how to do based on their childhood and their upbringing and their conditioning. So we were born into shall we say, a generational framework of preconditioning, belief systems, generational patterns, generational paradigms. So now we're already being conditioned from the moment we're born. But maybe dad was crazy. Maybe mom was an alcoholic. Maybe they were fighting all the time. Maybe they were great people, but they just didn't know how to meet our emotional needs. And so two things happen. The first thing is we learn all sorts of strategies to disconnect, shut down, and not feel. And so we suppress layers and layers and layers of unfelt feeling begin to, cover up our true essence. And we learn to erect walls around our sensitivity and around our heart as a protective mechanism to not feel the disappointment of dad is not around, the pain of abuse or fighting or intensity of screaming or abandonment. So we erect all these walls around us as a form of control to keep ourselves safe that we hold onto. And it worked for us when we were 5. It works for us when we're 10, maybe works for us when we're 15. But by the time we're 25 and 35 and 45, it starts getting in the way of our capacity to flow, of our capacity to surrender, of our capacity to be authentic. And so we also learn as children, I think, a way of being in the world where we look around and we go, oh, who do I need to be in order to get love and validation and approval? So we start developing all sorts of roles and masks and personas to fit in, get love, validation, and approval from mom, from dad, from our caretakers around us. We develop a mask, a persona. We contort ourselves into a shape, and we become a version of ourselves that we think we need to be in order to get love, validation, approval. And we end up thinking this is who we really are. The degree to which we believe that this pattern that we've become is who we are is limitation, is a prison. That holding on identification is ego, because we think that's who we are. And so when we're locked in the ego, we are afraid to question. We are afraid to change because we're afraid to surrender, because this feels like, I won't exist anymore. I'm going to die. And so resistance is the natural, shall we say, response. And so we have to realize ego is not what I am. We have to become aware of that. We have to start observing our conditioned patterns and questioning ourselves. See, the ego doesn't want to change. It wants everything to change, everyone else to change, but it doesn't want to change because that's how it keeps itself together. It's like, you change, the world changed, but I'm not changing. Because to change is to die, at least for the perceived sense of self. So when we know that we are not the set patterns, then I think we become less afraid to question ourselves, to question our beliefs, to question our values, to question our thoughts, to question our feelings. We become less afraid to maybe allow ourselves to feel those feelings that we learn to suppress and release them and let them go, because then we know that as we let them go, we don't really die. What we truly are is beyond the patterns that we're releasing. And so when we understand that, then we can maybe meet ourselves differently. And I think one first step of surrender is to observe your patterns, but also observe and embrace the fear, to observe and embrace the resistance. And many times what we mistakenly try to do is we see that we're afraid and we're resisting, and we try to force ourselves and fight ourselves to surrender. And now we become doubly resistant, doubly stuck. Part of surrender is sometimes to embrace your resistance and welcome the resistance, and to embrace the fact that in this moment you may not be surrendered. And so to surrender to the non-surrender is in a strange way, a deeper form of surrender, because now you're in relationship with what you're feeling. And when you can meet your resistance and non-surrender with embrace and loving and surrender, then that part of you that is afraid, that part of you that was developed to keep you safe, the ego can gently feel safe and relax and slowly open in its own way, surrender open in its own way. And then we can bring loving and healing and compassion to those parts of ourselves that were afraid, that developed in response to certain experiences. And healing is applying loving to those parts of ourselves that are hurting. And then a deeper surrender can happen, not because we're trying to like force surrender to happen, but because we're healing those parts of ourselves that are terrified and afraid. And so surrender can blossom from within.
Wow. For anyone who is just starting on their spiritual journey, I feel like what you just said is jam-packed with literally everything someone could ever need to know to get started on that change. The information you're hearing is what I wrote for our daily email, The Good Space Daily. So if you're already signed up, you'll have these tips in writing in your inbox. And if you're not already signed up and you're listening to this after the fact of us dripping them out live, we'll make it so that when you sign up, you can specifically ask for these emails and get them dripped out to you when you sign up. And that's the same with all the other topics and themes that we'll be covering for Feeling Your Best. So if you want to get these short daily reminders to access your authentic self in all areas of life and get resources, chances to win things, all of the good stuff, then make sure to sign up now. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to findyourgoodspace.com. Obviously, the ego is scared. It thinks it's going to die when there's change, when there's resistance. Actually, my therapist pointed this out to me. She said that with experiences, we have to learn to accept all of the emotions. It can't just be only the positive, only the negative, or whatever. It has to just be all of it together. And I think that's what you touched on too. It's like, as soon as we can be like, okay, the resistance, the fear, this is all part of it. This is natural. This is normal. Then we can start to create a safe space. Because really, you have to feel safe enough to be able to journey past what you're used to thinking and feeling. And then I feel like once you're safe, you can be like, is that really the truth? Is that really something that I want to believe for myself? Which I think is amazing. And then it also made me wonder, because obviously there's a personal spiritual component to it. And it makes me think about actual like physical death, because I like to believe that our souls live on. I feel like they live on. Sometimes I get scared because I don't have that physical proof that that's the case. My ego is like, but I can't really see that you do live on. So I'm curious to know your thoughts personally from your experiences about actual physical death. And then also, I hear you and what you're saying is true. So how can we, anyone listening, me, you, how do we exist in the world that so fights against what we're trying to do? Live authentically, to surrender more. How do you function and find your space and your place in a world that is overwhelmingly not that way?
Wow, I feel like there's like 5 questions packed in there. You're like, I'm going to pack in the questions. It's great. I love it. I love it. So if I miss any of these, just throw it in, okay? But one thing I just want to say, and then I'm going to go to the physical death, and then let's circle back to existing in the world. If people are feeling like, oh shit, I'm so much, that if you wonder, okay, where can I just start? Just start here. Just start. Look, one of the things that keeps us stuck, one of the things that keeps us resisting, one of the ways that ego resists are all the ways that we lie to ourselves. This is one of the ways that ego exists. We lie to ourselves for all the reasons I just shared. Good intention, but it's survival. It's just survival, you know? And so we stay in relationships that we know we're no longer in love. We work jobs that we hate where we compromise ourselves. We betray ourselves. We say yes when we mean no. And so I think there is no transformation without truth. And so if you want to just start, you don't have to worry about some mega surrender, but just to begin, ask yourself, what lies am I telling myself? Just start there. What lies am I telling myself? You have to want the truth more than you want what you have. You have to want the truth more than you want what you think you want. But if you just start with the truth will begin to set you free. You cannot change anything in life if you are resisting. And the only way to change something is not to resist it, but to come into acceptance of it and to embrace it and to make peace with it. Because when you are in relationship with reality as it is, what you feel, what's going on, then you can begin to shift it. Then you can begin to change something. But if you're in denial, like maybe you have an alcohol problem. No, I'm fine. Rather than saying, you know what? I have an alcohol issue. No judgment, no shame. Surrendering to, I have an alcohol problem. Surrendering doesn't mean just wallowing in it and just being caught up in your addiction. It means just acknowledging the truth. I have a problem with alcohol. It's removing the resistance. It's removing the denial. We go through unconsciousness, then we go through denial, then we go through negotiation. Then you have to move into acceptance. But acceptance doesn't mean surrender. There is a layer in the middle, which we can get into, between acceptance and surrender. Since we're there, let me just address it. And I want to go to your question, because this does tap into death. A lot of the time, we don't get to full-blown surrender because we skip the phase in the middle. The phase in the middle from acceptance. Because you can be in acceptance, like, it is what it is, but screw the universe. You're in acceptance, but you're not surrendered. Surrendered is the full open heart participation with the process of life that is happening. Like, I'm going to roll my sleeves up. I'm going to dive into this experience. I'm going to make the most out of this experience. And I'm surrendering to learning what I need to learn in this experience for my highest growth and evolution, because I'm trusting that everything is working for my highest growth and evolution as a soul. Like, that's surrender, okay? But to get there, the phase that is missing between acceptance and surrender is grieving. Many times, we don't allow ourselves to fully grieve, to truly grieve, because surrender is a kind of death. It's a death of who you thought you were. It's a death of the life that you thought you were going to live. It's a death of unfulfilled dreams, unfulfilled relationship. It's a death of an identity. It's a death of something. And when we don't fully grieve what was, what could have been, what we wanted, that wasn't, then a part of our heart isn't fully open. We're carrying the heaviness of that grief with us into the future. And it's hard to truly surrender to the new relationship, the new possibility, the new opportunity, because a part of us has not released and dealt with the old. And so grieving is the key bridge to surrender. And in our culture today, we haven't been taught how to grieve. We're often taught, oh, you feel sadness, just pop a pill. You feel sadness, just, have a drink. You feel sadness, just go buy some stuff. And so we've distracted ourselves. All feelings remain present till fully felt. All feelings that we don't feel in a truly conscious, intentional, healthy way just suppresses and manifests itself in often unhealthy addictions, behaviors, feelings, emotion, pain, dis-ease, sickness in some way. And so we often don't allow ourselves to feel because we're afraid the feeling is going to last forever. We're afraid that the feeling will be too overwhelming and I won't be able to cope and it will just overwhelm and break me. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel as an unconscious denial mechanism. Like, if I don't acknowledge that this relationship is over and I don't feel the grief, then maybe it's not really over. Or maybe this person hasn't really died. And it's a way to still hold on to what was, because to acknowledge the grief is to begin acknowledging that something is no longer. And so sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel the grief fully as a spiritual bypass, as a false way to stay in a high vibration, not realizing that the shit we don't deal with will manifest in our life over and over again. And so when you just give yourself the space to grieve, to acknowledge the grief consciously, without judgment, without resistance, with intention, to feel the grief. Grief happens in stages. Grief happens in layers. Each layer that you acknowledge the grieving and feel the grieving and allow the grieving to move through, you will free yourself. You will let go. And it's that letting go that opens you up to a more deeper possibility of surrender. So one thing that will help people is sometimes people think, I've been feeling grief, but I still feel it. It doesn't go away. But we don't realize that we're actually thinking about the grieving, not feeling it. And the key is to feel it. All feelings fully felt will dissolve. And so here's what will help. If you take the label off of the grief, just don't even call it grief. Don't even call it sadness. Don't try to analyze it, intellectualize it, think about it, but just experience the sensation of the grief as pure energy in your body. Just experience the sensation of grief as an energy, as a sensation in your body without a label. If you're able to just fully be with it and embrace it and experience it and allow that cycle of grief to move through, you will see that a layer of the grief will dissolve. And then maybe a few days later or a week or two later, another layer of the grief will dissolve. And each time you allow yourself to sort of process through a layer of the sensation of the grief, there will be a lightness, there will be a release, there will be more openness. And then you can actually open to being more surrendered, not just intellectually, but in your nervous system, in your physiology, in your emotion, in your body, because now you're letting go of the heartbreak, you're letting go of the old relationship, you're letting go of what was, then you're able to open to the new. And so that's something I would just say. And so acknowledge the truth. What lies am I telling myself? Requires some grieving. Take the pressure off of yourself of having to take any action. Sometimes the fear of the consequence of telling yourself the truth is so scary that we play confused. And so you don't have to break up. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to end anything, but just acknowledge the truth and feel the feelings that come up in your body, because that will begin a process. What lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know? And just feel. That starts a process of transformation that starts moving you, in the direction. And so, look, what I would say is one of the things that I think we do, if we want to be free, have to surrender to in life is that we will all die. I think when you can surrender to, you're going to die. Jesus died, Buddha died, Mother Teresa died, Gandhi died, Mandela died, Bob Marley died, Bruce Lee died, Lao Tzu died. Like every great person, at least in the physical human form, died. Maybe some resurrected, but we all have that process of death. There is no way out of this human experience. There's a lot of people now, biohackers and what have you, that we're going to live forever. Truth is, we're going to freaking die. That's the bottom line. And I think when we can just not run away from that, but celebrate that and surrender that and embrace that, this form will die. This form is transitory. This form will go. When we can embrace that and hold that close, then I think we're no longer resisting death, because the more we resist death is the more we actually are resisting life. We're afraid to live. But when we can embrace that, feel that, and ask ourselves, if death came, would I be ready? And if not, why not? Like, use the reality of death as not as a morbid thing, but as an inspiration to live life even more fully, as an inspiration, knowing that you don't have forever. Like, you don't know when that moment will come. And if death came, would you be ready? If not, why not? What's ungiven? What's unsaid? What's unexpressed? What's unforgiven? So much time we waste waiting for someone to apologize, holding grudges, because we think we have time and we don't. We don't. And so how would you need to live in such a way so that if death came, because it's going to come, hope we all live a long life, but I guarantee you many, if not 80%, 90% of the people, 95% of the people that died today, they didn't know they were going today. 100% of the people that died in the 9/11 disaster, in the tsunami, in the hurricane, had no idea they weren't coming home that day. So none of us know when that moment's coming. So for me, it's not about whether we're going to die. That's the only guarantee from the moment we're born. It's about how will you live your life? And when you live resisting, when you live fighting, when you live playing small, when you live holding on, when you live resisting who you are, resisting your truth and resisting, your bigness and your soul and your vision, this is the death. Nothing is as painful as resisting the deepest expression and the deepest impulse of what life and your soul and the divine and the universe and God is seeking to express through you. Because when you resist that deep impulse of truth that is calling you to express more and be more, you're living dead anyway, And so it's not about whether we're going to die. It's about how we're going to live. And I think to truly surrender is to truly be alive. Because when you surrender, you begin to realize that you're not just this little ego limited structure, this little, body form, that what you are is an infinite being. And part of surrender is surrendering beyond the ego. It's surrendering to that true nature, that which is living you and breathing you. And part of the surrender is surrendering to that. When you surrender, like, wow, there is an intelligence. Whatever you believe is whatever you believe. But there is an intelligence that is living you and breathing you and functioning you. And trillions and trillions and trillions of cells are being coordinated by that. And this same intelligence is functioning the sun, the star, the moons, all of existence. If you like sit with that, it's like, and I don't trust that to do my life. I trust in Siri more than this intelligence that is living and breathing and functioning me and the trillions of cells that are digesting my food. I trust in Google Maps more than my innate intelligence. This is like to live dead, basically. And so I think it was Rumi that said, to be truly alive, you must die before you die. You must die to who you were. You must die to the old identities. You must die to the old stories. You must die to the old energy, the old version of yourself. You must die to this limited sense of what you believe yourself to be so that you can find your true essence and identity. And to me, that is freedom. That is surrender. And I think then you are more able to allow yourself to trust life and allow life to live you. And I think what life can do through you, what God can do through you, what the universe can do through you and me and each of us is way more than what we can do on our own. And that's where the magic happens. That's where the miracle happens. So if people are like, but I want to manifest, I'm not going to manifest. You're going to manifest freaking more. Like by truly surrendering and you tap into the full potential of life, life starts manifesting to you like it did Buddha and Jesus and Mother Teresa and Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Mandela and all of these great. Life starts using you in ways that you can't imagine. To me, that is freedom. Like that's true freedom and that's true power.
My goodness. I hope that whoever's listening to this, not only are you being changed by this, but that you share it with someone you know that would love this, because I really feel like you have hit so many different layers, so many different levels. And I absolutely love that comparison of we trust Siri and Google more than this intelligence. No, but you're right. Like, and the funny thing is hearing you say it, I'm like, you'd be really dumb to like not trust the infinite intelligence, but we don't. I have trouble with that. And I had my first baby 6 months ago. And just even that, the fact that my body, without me consciously telling it, can grow human, that was the most insane.
Come on. Your body is growing a freaking life form, human, inside of you. Like,
and I didn't even tell it. It just did it.
We could stop this conversation right here, end the conversation. Nothing else needs to be said. Like that is unbelievable. And you didn't sit there and go, okay, buddy, do this. It was just every day happening. Maybe you ate well, maybe you didn't eat well, maybe you did something you shouldn't have done, but it's just still doing it. That intelligence is the intelligence of life. And we don't trust it, like it's mad to not trust when everyday life is showing us its intelligence. There is an intelligence of life. And so I think to surrender is to surrender to that. It's to surrender to what we really are, which is part of that intelligence.
And we don't have to go into this, but I'm just thinking too of like, for people who are working for other companies or who have careers or doing all these things, is there a way to still be surrendered in a system that doesn't actually operate on surrender? Like, is that even a possibility? Because like you said before, you can admit things to yourself, the reality of things. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job. Doesn't mean you have to leave the relationship. Just admit that truth. So if someone is like, I hate my job, it's suffocating me.
Great. Start there. So first acknowledge the truth. Don't be BSing yourself. Going, I love my job. And when deep down you hate it and it's eating you up and say, I hate my job. Great. But could I got 4 children and I have to pay the bills and I can't just leave and all this surrender stuff doesn't work because I can't just like, I surrender and I quit. I'm not saying quit. Surrender doesn't mean being lazy or irresponsibility, because you not taking care of your kids is irresponsible. And that's not surrender. And so surrender is to acknowledge, I hate my job. The truth is it's not aligned. The truth is this is not why I've been put on the planet. And now, as you acknowledge that, you surrender to this truth. But then you also have to surrender to this is where I'm at right now. You fully surrender to that. And so many of us will, I hate my job. And we come to work mad every day, pissed off every day. We do not so great a job at work, and we're mad at our boss, and we're mad at the government, we're mad at our employees, we're mad at our clients. We don't bring all of ourselves because we don't want to be here. So we're kind of like resisting the job, resisting showing up fully where we are with who we're with, giving all of what we have to the moment. That is a form of resistance that keeps us stuck. And so when you can acknowledge, I hate my job, there's the truth. Then you can start getting in touch with, okay, what is it that I really want? What is it that the universe is seeking to express through me next? I don't know. So every day, make sure you create space and time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour on the weekends to start visioning and working on where it is you want to go. Because many times when people say to me, I hate my job, I hate my job, I hate my job, when you just focus on complaining alone, and don't do anything and you just complain, you actually reinforce. That is a prayer for more of what you don't want. That is an affirmation for more of what you don't want. What you don't want is expanding because that's what you're affirming and that's what you're focusing on. So I hate my job. Great, done. Acknowledgement. Now, when I ask people, so how much time did you spend on what you want? How much time did you actually spend yesterday and the day before on moving towards what lights you? But I don't know. At least how much time did you spend on meditating on it? None. How is it going to change, right? And so surrender is not just something falls from the sky. Surrender is making yourself available to do your part, to meet the universe, to make yourself available to receiving the vision. So then I would say, if you really hate your job, spend 30 minutes a day of journaling, sitting with what you want, sitting with receiving information, sitting in meditation to hear the voice of your soul, the voice of God, to receive the download. Because if you sit and you listen, the universe will give you clues and God will speak to you in many different ways. Maybe he'll speak to you in a Facebook ad. Maybe he'll speak to you through this podcast. Maybe he'll speak to you through an app. Maybe he'll speak to you through a poster, driving over the freeway. The universe can speak in mysterious ways, but we're often not paying attention to the signs. And so focus every day a certain amount of time that is doable to moving you towards where you want to go. And then you can start creating a plan towards where you want to go and executing that plan as much as you can. The other thing I would say is while you are working a job that you hate, here's the key. While you are working a job that you hate, don't wait until you have a job that you love, because if you hate where you are, you will never get to where you really love. And so if you're working a job that you hate, then surrender to it. And one thing that often stops people from manifesting the next level of what they want is they have not learned the lessons where they are with who they're with yet. Life is a school. Life is a university for your soul's evolution. We incarnate into this human experience in order to learn, in order to grow, in order to evolve. Every single person, every single situation, every single job, every single experience is really the curriculum for your soul's growth and evolution. It's like classroom, grade 11 to grade 12. You got to take a test. You got to learn the lessons, and then you got to evolve. But if you don't pass the test, you stay in the same class again. So life is just kind of like a school. When you don't pass the test, you stay in the same relationships. All lessons are repeated until learned. So if you want to up-level your life, learn the lesson where you are with who you're with right now. Because when you learn the soul lesson with where you are with who you're with, this is the key that unlocks the lock to the next level of your life. And many of us, we haven't learned the self-esteem lesson. We haven't learned the lesson for why we've attracted that job. We haven't learned the lesson for why we've attracted that boss. We haven't evolved and grown into the person that is capable of the next level, but we want the next level, but we haven't learned the lesson where we are. So when you learn the lesson where you are with who you're with, that unlocks the key to the next level. And then make sure you do and you bring all of yourself 100% to do the job where you are in excellence, because likely there is something that you need to learn where you are. As you learn that, give 100% to the job. Bring all of the energy with joy, with understanding, focus on what's great about the job, and bring 100% of yourself to the job to do the job with excellence, because that frequency and energy starts elevating you and drawing to you the next possibility.
Wow. Can you imagine if everyone showed up that way? What a world that would be. That would be amazing. Thank you for spending this time with us and sharing so much wisdom. I felt your energy. I can tell that you get it. I loved everything you said. Do you have any books that you're reading right now that you want to tell us about? Aside from yours, obviously, The Magic of Surrender.
Aside from Magic of Surrender, what am I reading right now? I'm reading this book on I was reading this book by John Paul Getty, funnily enough, and this book about Rockefeller. So those were some books I was reading, books about wealth and abundance.
Love that.
And how they created their wealth and abundance.
I need to get the titles from you because we just did Feeling Good About Money in January.
How to Get Rich by Getty. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to have to check it out. So if someone listening wants to get in touch with you or connect with you or hear more from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, a couple of ways. The book, The Magic of Surrender, obviously, you can find that on Amazon. Get the paperback version. It's a roadmap to freedom and surrender. So check that out. If people are really inspired by today's conversation and maybe you feel ready for your next level, you feel that you've been put on the planet for a calling that is perhaps bigger than yourself and you're ready to break through and break free. Twice a year, I do a very special event in Bali, Indonesia. This is my last year doing this event. It's called Boundless Bliss. I have done 20 of these events in the last 10 years, and they are life-changing. 12 days immersion, seminar training without walls, where I take people and uncondition you and catapult you into the world to live your purpose. It's a very unique transformational process, perhaps the highest level of my work. This July the 28th to August the 8th, we go for the 21st event that I'm doing in Bali. People can find out more at www.boundlessblissbali.com. That's boundlessblissbali.com. My main website, Kute Blackson, K-U-T-E, Kute Blackson. And then Instagram is Kute Blackson, Facebook, Kute Love Now. My podcast, Soul Talk. Say hi, find me there.
Wonderful. We'll make sure everything you mentioned is linked in the show notes so it's easy for anyone to find. Kute, thank you again so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
If you like what you're hearing so far and feel inspired or changed or just motivated after hearing this message, please consider joining our membership. We work so hard to dissect information and make it simple and digestible for you so you can go out in the world and be a light, connect to your authentic self. And we really want to continue being that landing place for you. So if you're considering even one message or brand to support, we hope that you'll consider ours. And if you want a link for that, it is in the show notes. Now it's time for an affirmation. I choose to surrender in every situation and trust that life is expressing itself through me in big and expansive ways. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.